Hey guys, and welcome to the 21st installment of Updated Builds, a series of videos where I go back over Warframes that I already made one or more videos about and I bring their builds up to date. Now today we're finally gonna take a look at Vault, who has taken me quite a long time to finish because for whatever reason I had really hard time finalizing all the builds. So as always, I'm going to go through all the builds that I use on Vault and I switch between them based on what I'm doing, and the three builds I have for you today are number 1 a speed build, which unsurprisingly focuses on speed, then number 2 an Eidolon hunter setup which is focused more around his shield, and finally at number 3 we have a capacitance setup which focuses more on discharge. And let's start it off with the speed setup. The order I'm using here is sprint boost for a little bit of extra sprint speed, which is unfortunately not reflected on the stat screen, and rush in the extra slot for even more sprint speed. Then I have Augur Message, Primed Continuity and Narrow Minded for a ton of duration, so speed lasts a decent amount of time. Intensify and Transient Fortitude for some power strength, so the speed buff is stronger and we can run around faster. And then I like to have one defensive mod, and I generally go for Vitality because of Slash and Toxin procs. Then there is the augment for speed called Shocking Speed, which makes it so that if you have speed active, you shock nearby enemies for a small amount of electricity damage and you proc electricity on them. This will just straight up one-shot low-level enemies, it will crowd control high-level enemies, and it will break certain containers, so it makes the whole setup more convenient and much safer. It's also not affected by power range, which is why we can safely run narrow-minded here. And to top it all off, I'm using Streamline to get some efficiency without sacrificing duration with something like Fleeting Expertise. Now this is definitely not the fastest speed setup, you can add a lot more speed if you can manage it, but I found that this is about as much speed as I can manage, especially since I like to use this with melee weapons. And if you add too much speed, stairs and ramps become a problem, because if you're not looking straight down as you're running down the stairs or the ramps, you will start doing slam attacks. This setup is also the reason why I don't have a Firewalker setup on Nezha like some people pointed out yesterday, and it's because Vault just feels a lot better. Nezha just gets too slippery at higher speeds. Now one reason why you might not want to go for too much speed, and you might even go for less speed than you can see over here, is something that you have probably noticed in the footage, and that's doors. Doors in normal missions weren't really made with this much speed in mind, so if you're going really fast, they won't open fast enough and you will keep slamming into them over and over and over again. When it comes to the planes though, well, there are no doors, so you can go as fast as you can, which is a lot of fun, and I still use this to farm Cetus Wisps, even though the Wormhole Nova setup is far faster. It's just a lot more fun to run around like a madman than to teleport from pond to pond. Moving on to my personal Eidolon Hunter setup that I personally really enjoy using for fighting the Eidolons. And this one is missing an Exhaust mod because I couldn't really figure out a way to format the frame without breaking the other two builds. Now the aura I'm using here is Energy Siphon because I try to avoid meta squads as much as possible. I find them incredibly boring because you're not really fighting the boss, you're just zerging it down as fast as possible. So I either go solo or public, which means most of the time I don't have magnetic protection, so I lose all my energy during Energy Spike, and Energy Siphon helps to bring it back up. Then I'm using Natural Talent, which is super nice for a setup like this because what it allows you to do is jump up into the air, place one shield very high up, and then place another shield as you're falling down, which gives you the added benefit of being shielded from the homing missiles, as well as the bonus crit damage you get by firing through the shield. I'm also using Streamline for a little bit of extra efficiency, so the shield isn't as expensive and I can spam it all over the place. I then have Primed Vigor, Redirection and Vitality for a ton of health and shields, and this is mostly because I tend to run this solo and the final phase is pretty hectic with a squishy frame like Vault. However, if you are running a meta setup, the Eidolon is gonna die in like 5 seconds, so you don't really need defense. I then decided to add Shock Trooper into this build, which allows you to use shock on your allies and give them a bunch of extra electricity damage for a decent amount of time because we have a lot of duration. And the reason why this is, in my opinion, really good, at least in public squads, not meta squads, because there you're basically gonna one-shot the joints and then just butcher any of the Eidolons, is because the Eidolons are weak to radiation, which is heat and electricity. So if you zap an ally with this, the extra electricity damage will combine with their already existing radiation and they will do a ton of extra damage. And finally, to get some extra duration so our shield lasts a decent amount of time, I'm using Primed Continuity and Narrow Minded, and this just makes it so that you don't have to recast your shields all the time. This has very quickly become my favorite Eidolon Hunter setup once I've learned all the abilities and all the telegraphs and stuff like that. And it's also one of the fastest setups you can use when soloing the Eidolons because your shield is gonna help in all the phases. It's gonna help you take down the Eidolon's shields because firing your amplifier through it will boost its crit damage. And when the Eidolon's shields are down, you can fire your sniper rifle through it to either do more damage to the joints or to the Eidolon itself. Also, since shooting through the shield boosts your crit damage, crit-based amplifiers are far better than the status or just pure damage ones. Another cool thing about this setup is that it's not limited to hunting Eidolons. You can very easily use it in normal mission as a standard shield build. And it's pretty good at surviving even sortie level missions because you have a ton of health and shields and you have the riot shield shielding you from the front. Just remember that if you want to carry the shield around with you, it's a good idea to pop speed because of the reduced movement speed. And finally we come to the capacitance or discharge, or what I used to call it, the battle mage build. Now since this one is built mostly around Eidolon, I'm using corrosive projection here as my aura to strip away the enemy armor, because discharge does electricity damage and that does 50% less versus alloy armor. Then since I don't have any efficiency, I'm using primed flow so I can bank a ton of energy to cast discharge. Then there is primed continuity and augur message for a decent amount of duration, and this is because of the update 22.12 change when they made it so that discharge has a less duration the farther away the enemy is. Next up is augur reach and stretch, which gives you a decent amount of range, and this allows you to cover something like Eidolon with a single cast. And I'm using the capacitance augment, which converts 3% of all the damage done by discharge into shields and overshields for you and all your allies. This is also why I'm using vitality to counter slash and toxin procs, because you can easily generate shields with capacitance. And to top it all off, I'm using transient fortitude and power drift for some power strength, which translates into more damage. Now this setup will only really do damage on Eidolon and missions like Eidolon, because it relies on the enemies stacking close together to do damage. If the enemies are spread very far apart, it will just crowd control them. But it's very strong, it will clear the majority of the tile set with a single cast and crowd control what's left. And it's also pretty beefy because you're always gonna be at maximum overshields. Now one thing you could do with this setup, which would turn it into a more spammy and bursty kind of thing, is take out primed flow and put in a fully ranked fleeting expertise, which will give you a ton of efficiency, allowing you to spam discharge far more often at the cost of a lot of duration. And there really isn't much else to say about this setup. It's pretty straightforward. You press a button, everything dies, and you and your allies get overshields. Now, as always, all of these builds will work on the regular Vault as well as Vault Prime. They may just require a little bit more format on the standard version. And if you're not quite sure how to format it, the best way to do it, in my opinion, is to simply put on all the mods, and if they don't fit, look for the one with the highest capacity drain that's shared between all your builds, format for that, and do that until all the mods fit. And I thank you very much for watching. As always guys, I hope you've enjoyed the video and it was helpful, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.